The cake knife trembled in my hand. Gregory stood 10 feet away, his arm draped around a woman half my age, her crimson lips pressed against his cheek. Our guests raised their glasses, laughter bouncing off the restaurant walls like broken glass. I watched my sons, Caleb and Ethan, exchange knowing smirks across the table. They knew. They had always known. The room tilted sideways as reality crashed through my carefully constructed world. This was supposed to be Gregory's 50th birthday celebration, the party I had planned for 3 months, saving every detail in a leather notebook. Instead, it became the night everything I believed in turned to ash. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're watching me from. Drop your country in the comments section. And also subscribe to this channel. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Alina Matthews, and I'm 52 years old. I've spent 30 years as a nurse, patching wounds and saving lives. But standing there in my blue dress, watching my husband kiss another woman while our sons grinned like conspirators, I realized I couldn't save myself. Not yet. The champagne glass slipped from someone's hand, shattering on the marble floor. Nobody noticed. They were too busy celebrating my humiliation. The sound distorted around me. Laughter became a dull hum, like standing underwater. I watched Gregory's mistress lean closer, whispering something that made him throw his head back in delight. Her hand rested possessively on his shoulder, fingers adorned with rings I'd never seen. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. My chest tightened, each breath scraping against my ribs like sandpaper. Caleb, my oldest at 28, caught my eye and quickly looked away. Guilt flickered across his face before vanishing behind a mask of indifference. Ethan, 25, stared at his phone, jaw clenched. They sat there, my boys, the children I'd carried and raised and sacrificed everything for, and they couldn't even meet my gaze. The birthday cake sat between us, untouched, its 50 candles melting into colorful puddles. Someone started singing, voices rising in cheerful discord. Gregory beamed, pulling the woman closer. She giggled, a sound like breaking crystal. My hands went numb. The knife clattered onto the table, and finally, someone noticed me. Mrs. Patterson from next door touched my arm. "Alina, dear, are you all right?" Her voice came from far away, muffled and strange. I nodded automatically, my mouth forming words I couldn't hear. The room spun gently, faces blurring into watercolor smears. Gregory was still talking, gesturing grandly with his free hand, while she laughed at something only they understood. I needed air. My legs moved without permission, carrying me away from the table, past curious stares and pitying glances. The restaurant's front door felt impossibly heavy. Cold autumn wind slapped my face as I stumbled into the parking lot, gasping like I'd been drowning. The smell of expensive perfume clung to my clothes, mixed with cigarette smoke and betrayal. My car sat in the far corner, a sensible sedan I'd bought 5 years ago after my old one died. I leaned against it, forehead pressed to the cold metal, and let the tears come. They burned hot trails down my cheeks, ruining the makeup I'd spent an hour applying. Behind me, the restaurant glowed warm and inviting, full of people celebrating a man who just murdered his wife's heart in public. I drove home on autopilot, traffic lights bleeding into each other. Our house sat at the end of Maple Street, a 2-story colonial I'd painted yellow last spring. The porch light glowed softly, welcoming me back to a life that no longer existed. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. Family photos lined the hallway, frozen moments of happiness I no longer recognized. There was Caleb's graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming. Ethan's wedding last year, all of us dressed in our best clothes, pretending we were whole. I walked to the bathroom and stared at the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger. Fine lines bracketed her mouth, gray streaked her brown hair, exhaustion shadowed her eyes. When had I become invisible? When had my husband started seeing through me instead of at me? I whispered to my reflection, "What did I do wrong?" The house stayed silent, offering no answers. My wedding ring caught the light, 25 years of promises reduced to a circle of gold that suddenly felt too heavy to wear. Memory pulled me backward, 25 years into the past. I was 22, working night shifts at Community General, barely making rent on my studio apartment. My car had broken down on Route 9, smoke pouring from under the hood. Gregory's garage sat half a mile away, a small shop with peeling paint and a hand-lettered sign. He'd come out wiping his hands on a rag, grease under his fingernails, smile bright as summer. Rough day, he'd asked, and something in his voice made me smile back. He fixed my radiator, refused payment, and asked me to dinner instead. We ate at a diner that's been torn down now, replaced by a chain restaurant. He told me about his dreams, how he'd own a chain of garages someday, how he'd build something real from nothing. I believed him. We believed each other. 6 months later, we married at City Hall, no family, no ceremony, just 2 kids convinced love was enough. Our first apartment was tiny, 1 bedroom with a kitchenette and a bathroom where you couldn't fully open the door. But it was ours. We painted the walls together, bought furniture from yard sales, made love on a mattress on the floor. I worked doubles while he built his business. We were happy then. At least, I think we were. Caleb arrived first, screaming his way into the world at 3 a.m. I held him against my chest, marveling at his tiny fingers, his dark eyes that looked so much like Gregory's. 2 years later, Ethan came, quieter, easier, a baby who slept through the night by 6 weeks. I worked part-time, then full-time, then overtime, juggling bottles and diapers and endless exhaustion. Gregory's first garage opened when Caleb was 4, then a second, then a third. Success came slowly, then all at once. Suddenly we had money for a better car, a bigger apartment, name-brand groceries. Gregory started wearing expensive shirts, driving newer vehicles, staying out late with business partners. The boys grew tall and confident, absorbing their father's swagger like sponges. I kept working my shifts, kept saving money, kept making sure everyone had what they needed. But somewhere in those years of building and growing, we stopped looking at each other. Dinner conversations became logistics meetings. Bedtime became just sleep. The distance grew like frost across a window, beautiful and deadly. Until one day, I couldn't see through it anymore. We moved into the house on Maple Street when the boys were 12 and 10. I'd driven past it for years, admiring the wraparound porch and the oak tree in the front yard. When it went up for sale, Gregory bought it without asking me. "Surprise," he said, handing me the keys like he'd solved all our problems. I decorated every room myself, painting walls, hanging curtains, arranging furniture until it felt like home. Gregory bought a Lexus, then a BMW, then a truck he never drove. The boys started private school, wearing uniforms and speaking a language I didn't understand. They made friends whose parents had summer homes and trust funds. Slowly, I became the embarrassment, the nurse mother who worked too much and dressed too plain. The first time Caleb called me too sensitive was during an argument about his report card. He'd failed chemistry and I'd grounded him. "You're overreacting," he said, rolling his eyes. Gregory laughed from the living room. "She's always like that," he told Caleb, loud enough for me to hear. Something cracked inside me that day, small but significant, like the first hairline fracture in a dam. Now I was back at that restaurant, watching Gregory toast the woman who kept his heart young. Her name was Vanessa, I'd learn later, 28 years old, a real estate agent with a smile like poison. She touched his face gently, intimately, while our friends pretended not to stare. Caleb raised his glass, catching his father's eye. Some silent message passed between them, understanding and approval. Ethan shifted uncomfortably but said nothing, which somehow felt worse. The betrayal wasn't just Gregory's anymore. It belonged to all of them, a family conspiracy I'd never been invited to join. I stood up quietly, chair scraping against the floor. Gregory's watch sat on the table where I'd placed it earlier, still wrapped, birthday card unread. I left it there, along with the woman I'd been that morning. The door closed behind me with a soft click that nobody heard over the laughter. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and deleted the family group chat, watching messages vanish one by one. Years of photos and jokes and "love you, Mom" texts, erased like they'd never existed. Like I'd never existed. I drove to the river, parked under the old bridge where teenagers came to drink and couples came to fight. City lights reflected on the water, wavering and uncertain. My phone buzzed constantly, messages piling up. I didn't look. Instead, I sat there until dawn, watching the sky turn from black to gray to pale yellow. My wedding ring caught the sunrise, 25 years of loyalty reduced to 14 grams of gold. I twisted it off slowly, surprised by how easily it slid over my knuckle. For a moment, I held it, feeling its weight, remembering the day Gregory slipped it on my finger in that courthouse, both of us young and stupid and certain. Then I dropped it into my coffee cup from the night before. It landed with a small clink, sinking into cold liquid like a ship going down. The sound felt final, important, like closing a chapter in a book I'd never wanted to read. I called the hospital at 6, spoke to my supervisor in a voice that didn't sound like mine. "I need to take a few days," I said. "Family emergency." She didn't ask questions. In 15 years, I'd never called in sick once. The house was different when I returned, though nothing had physically changed. It felt hollow, echoing like walking through a museum of someone else's life. Gregory's side of the closet was half empty, his toiletries gone from the bathroom. He'd packed while I was gone, quick and efficient, like he'd been planning this for months. Maybe he had been. The boys' childhood rooms sat untouched, shrines to versions of them that no longer existed. Caleb's baseball trophies lined his shelf, dusty and forgotten. Ethan's art supplies filled his desk, dried out and useless. I'd kept everything exactly as they'd left it, a mother's desperate attempt to freeze time. Now it all looked pathetic. I packed methodically, folding clothes into suitcases, wrapping my mother's china in newspaper. I took my nursing certificates off the wall, my medical journals from the shelf, my late mother's locket from the jewelry box. Everything else could burn for all I cared. The boys called constantly. I let it ring. Gregory texted, "We need to talk." I blocked his number. By sunset, I'd reduced 30 years of life to 4 suitcases and 2 cardboard boxes. That's all I was taking. That's all I needed. The divorce lawyer's office smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Mr. Harrison listened to my story without expression, taking notes in precise handwriting. "This is fairly straightforward," he said finally. "No-fault divorce, asset division, done in 6 months." I signed papers that blurred together, my signature appearing again and again like a magic trick. The house would be sold, proceeds split evenly. Gregory could keep his businesses. I wanted nothing from him except my freedom. Friends started calling with carefully worded questions. Church members stopped me after service with pitying looks. "We heard," they'd whisper, touching my arm like I was dying. Maybe I was. The woman I'd been was certainly dead. I rented a small apartment near the hospital, 1 bedroom with a kitchenette that reminded me painfully of that first place Gregory and I had shared. But this time I was alone. Coworkers whispered when I passed in the hallways. "She looks tired," I heard someone say. I smiled anyway, the professional smile I'd perfected over 3 decades of dealing with difficult patients. Nobody needed to know I was dying inside. Mrs. Chen was 83, recovering from hip surgery, sharp as a tack despite her age. "You'd make a good manager," she told me one evening while I adjusted her IV. I laughed, but the words stuck. That night, I researched hospital administration programs, staying up until 3 reading about degrees and requirements and possibilities. The application process was brutal. I applied to 5 programs and got rejected by 4. The 5th put me on their waiting list. I sold my grandmother's pearl earrings to afford the application fees. 6 weeks later, an acceptance email arrived. I read it 3 times, certain it was a mistake. But no, there it was. "We are pleased to inform you." My hands shook as I confirmed my enrollment. Classes started in September. I was 52 years old, going back to school with kids young enough to be my children. A colleague named Patricia offered to drive me to weekend classes. "We've all got to start somewhere," she said when I tried to thank her. This was it. The first real step forward since everything fell apart. School was harder than I'd imagined. The younger students called me ma'am with respectful distance. Professors talked about theories I'd never heard of, using words that didn't exist when I was in nursing school. I studied at my kitchen table until my eyes burned, surviving on coffee and stubbornness. The first exam crushed me. I got a 68, barely passing, the red marks on my paper looking like wounds. I cried in my car for 20 minutes, then went home and studied harder. The second exam, 75. Third, 82. By midterms, I was getting 90s. When my first A came back, perfectly printed at the top of my capstone project, I sat alone in my apartment and sobbed. Not from sadness this time, from pride, pure, unexpected, overwhelming pride. There was no one to tell, no one to celebrate with, just me and this grade that proved I could rebuild myself from nothing. I bought a small bottle of champagne, drank it alone at my kitchen counter, and toasted the woman in my bathroom mirror. She looked different now. Older, yes, but stronger too, like something forged in fire. The courthouse was cold on the day my divorce finalized. Judge Morrison read the decree in a monotone voice, words washing over me like rain. "Irreconcilable differences. equitable distribution, decree of dissolution. Just like that, 25 years evaporated. The judge asked if I wanted to reclaim my maiden name. I hadn't even considered it, but standing there, watching the legal death of my marriage, something clicked. Yes, I said clearly. Eleanor Matthews. My mother's name, my grandmother's name, the name I was born with and should never have given up. The clerk processed the paperwork while I waited, each stamp feeling like a declaration of independence. When she handed me the documents, my new name appeared in official black ink, Eleanor Matthews, not Gregory's wife, not the boy's mother, just me. I signed the final form with a steady hand, surprised by how calm I felt. This isn't the end, I whispered to myself. This is me starting over. Outside, autumn leaves swirled in the parking lot, golden and red and dying beautifully. I drove away without looking back. The job posting appeared in my email like fate. Director of Nursing Services needed for Community Hospital, 2 hours north. The facility was small, underfunded, struggling under mountains of debt and poor management. Perfect. I applied that night, attaching my transcript and a cover letter I rewrote 6 times. The interview happened via video call, me sitting ramrod straight in my apartment, answering questions about budgets and staff management and patient outcomes. They hired me 3 days later. I gave my notice, packed my life into a moving truck, and drove north on a Tuesday morning in October. The new town was smaller than my old one, quieter, full of people who didn't know my story. Community Hospital sat on the edge of downtown, a brick building that had seen better days. Inside, the staff looked exhausted, overworked, close to breaking. I understood that feeling. My first day, I called an all-staff meeting. 50 faces stared at me with varying degrees of hope and skepticism. I'm Eleanor Matthews, I said, and we're going to save this place together. The first year was brutal. Budget cuts meant laying off 3 nurses and 2 administrators. I took a pay cut myself, putting the money back into supplies and equipment. Staff meetings ran late into the evening as we restructured departments and implemented new protocols. I worked 14-hour days, came home to my empty apartment, ate dinner standing at the counter, then fell into bed and did it again the next day. Holidays were silent. Christmas came and went without a single call from my sons. I bought myself a small tree, decorated it with second-hand ornaments, and spent the day alone watching old movies. It should have been depressing, but strangely, it wasn't. This was my life now, clean and simple, free from the constant ache of being ignored by people who should love me. The hospital slowly improved. Patient satisfaction scores crept upward. Staff turnover decreased. We passed our state inspection with flying colors. The team started calling me the Rock because nothing seemed to rattle me. They didn't know I'd already survived the worst thing that could happen. Everything else was easy in comparison. The promotion came during a spring rainstorm, water drumming against my office window. The hospital board wanted to expand my role to Director of Nursing Services for the entire county system. More responsibility, more pay, more proof that I could build something from ruins. The ceremony was small, just the board and key staff. Nobody from my old life attended. My mentor, Dr. Williams, hugged me afterward. "You did this without anyone's hand but your own," she said. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. That night, I treated myself to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. 1 person, 1 meal, 1 glass of wine. The waiter asked if I was celebrating something. "Yes," I told him. "I'm celebrating me." He smiled like he understood. When the bill came, I paid it with my new salary, tipped generously, and walked out into the cool night air feeling lighter than I had in years. Success tasted different when you earned it yourself. Sweeter. More real. Years passed like pages turning in a book. I watched seasons change through my office window, winter snow giving way to spring flowers giving way to summer heat. The hospital thrived under new leadership, expanding services and adding staff. I mentored young nurses fresh out of school, teaching them everything I'd learned in 3 decades of care. Some reminded me painfully of my younger self, bright-eyed and eager, convinced they could save everyone. I taught them the truth. You couldn't save everyone, but you could show up every day and try. The work filled my days with purpose. I wasn't lonely exactly, more alone by choice, which felt different. I dated occasionally, nice men who took me to dinner and tried to understand why I flinched at commitment. None of them stuck. Maybe I was too damaged, too careful with my rebuilt life, or maybe I was finally content with just myself. The hospital corridors became my home, the staff my chosen family. We celebrated victories together, mourned losses together, kept each other standing during the hard times. The envelope arrived on a Monday, expensive paper with embossed lettering. Inside was an invitation to the State Hospital Excellence Awards, where I'd been nominated for Administrator of the Year. The ceremony would be held in my old city, the place I'd fled from 5 years ago. My stomach twisted. The event was sponsored by Premier Motors, one of Gregory's old competitors. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. I almost declined. Then something stubborn rose up in me, the same force that had carried me through divorce and school and rebuilding. Why should I hide? I'd done nothing wrong. I was succeeding spectacularly. Let them see what they'd thrown away. I called the coordinator, accepted the invitation, and bought a new dress, midnight blue silk that made me look powerful. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining every possible scenario. Would Gregory be there? The boys? Would they even recognize me? Would I recognize them? By dawn, I decided it didn't matter. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me claiming my moment in a room full of witnesses. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and success. Hospital administrators from across the state mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I arrived alone, chin up, stride confident, wearing my new dress like armor. The name tag they handed me read Director Eleanor Matthews in bold letters. I pinned it carefully to my chest, a shield against the past. Then I saw them. Gregory stood near the bar, older now, hair graying at the temples, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders. Caleb and Ethan flanked him, both looking tired and uncomfortable in formal wear. One of them held a small child, a granddaughter I'd never met. They were here seeking partnerships, I'd learn later. Gregory's business had collapsed 2 years ago, bad investments and worse timing. Now he was begging for scraps from competitors who'd outlasted him. Our eyes met across the crowded room. Recognition hit them like a physical blow. Gregory's face went pale. Caleb's mouth fell open. Ethan just stared, his expression unreadable. I turned away calmly, accepting a glass of water from a passing waiter. Let them stare. Let them wonder. I had work to do. They approached during the cocktail hour, a hesitant delegation of regret. Gregory spoke first, his voice uncertain in a way I'd never heard. "Eleanor, you look wonderful." I nodded politely, the way I'd greet any stranger. "Thank you," Caleb tried next. "Mom, we've been trying to reach you. We wanted to apologize." "Apologize," I repeated flatly. The word hung between us. Ethan shifted his weight, the child in his arms fussing quietly. "We were wrong," he said, "about everything. We should have stood by you." I looked at each of them carefully, seeing the years etched into their faces. They'd aged badly, stress-carving lines that shouldn't exist yet. "Good. You made your choices," I said quietly. "And I made mine. I'm sorry you had to learn so late that loyalty is a currency that never loses value." Gregory opened his mouth to argue, but the microphone crackled. They were calling my name, asking me to come to the stage. I excused myself politely, leaving them standing there looking lost. As I walked away, I heard Caleb whisper to his father, "She's really different." Yes, I was. The spotlight was bright, warm on my skin. I stood behind the podium looking out at hundreds of faces, some familiar, most strangers. My notes sat in front of me, but I didn't need them. This speech had been writing itself in my heart for 5 years. "Thank you for this honor," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I want to talk tonight about loss and rebirth, about the moment everything you built falls apart and you have a choice, stay in the ruins or build something new." I told them about rebuilding a failing hospital. I didn't mention rebuilding a failing life, but people heard it anyway. Some people lose everything and find themselves. Some people keep everything and lose their soul. I learned that family isn't about who shares your name. It's about who shares your heart, who shows up when you're drowning, who celebrates your victories instead of resenting them. The audience was silent, absorbed. I found Gregory in the crowd. Our eyes met, and I saw tears on his face. "Too late. Choose the people who choose you," I concluded, "and never apologize for becoming the person you needed to be." The applause was thunderous. I smiled, genuinely, and walked off stage feeling lighter than air. That night in my hotel room, I revised my will. The document was simple, direct, final. I removed Caleb and Ethan's names, leaving blank spaces where their inheritance should have been. Instead, I designated everything to the Eleanor Matthews Nursing Scholarship Fund for Women Starting Over, a trust I'd established the previous year. It would help women leaving bad marriages, rebuilding lives, finding themselves again. Women like me, but younger, with time still ahead of them. The act wasn't vengeful. It was redemptive. My money would do more good helping strangers than enriching sons who'd stood by and watched their father destroy me. I signed the new will in my hotel room at midnight, my signature clear and confident. The notary I'd arranged to meet stamped it official. Done. My legacy would be kindness, not blood. As I sealed the envelope, I felt something release inside me, some last thread of obligation finally severed. I owed them nothing now. Not money, not forgiveness, not even my anger. They were simply people I used to know, growing smaller in my rearview mirror with every day I drove forward. 3 weeks later, Caleb appeared at my office unannounced. My assistant tried to stop him, but I waved her off. Let him come. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, standing in front of my desk like a child called to the principal's office. "Mom," he started, then stopped. "Director Matthews," he corrected himself. I gestured to a chair. He sat. We stared at each other for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that night," he said finally. "Your birthday party, I mean Dad's party, whatever. I've been thinking about it every day for 5 years. And," he struggled with the words, "I was a coward. I was so desperate for Dad's approval that I helped him hurt you. I knew about her for months and said nothing. I stood there and watched him humiliate you in public, and I did nothing." "Yes," I agreed. "You did. Can you forgive me?" I considered the question carefully. "Forgiveness isn't a door you can knock on once and walk through. It's a garden you have to tend. Start by planting remorse, water it with changed behavior, wait for growth. Maybe someday something beautiful will bloom." I stood, signaling the conversation was over. He stood too, hesitating. Then he did something unexpected. He hugged me. I let him but didn't hug back. My arms stayed at my sides. When he pulled away, his eyes were red. "I love you, Mom." "I know," I said gently, but love wasn't enough anymore. It never had been. Summer came again, hot and bright. The hospital held its annual charity drive, staff and patients gathering on the front lawn for a picnic fundraiser. Children ran through sprinklers while volunteers grilled hamburgers. Music played from speakers someone had set up. I stood at my office window watching, a cup of coffee warming my hands. The scene below was full of life and laughter and community. We'd built this. Together, brick by brick, policy by policy, we'd saved this place from collapse. My staff waved up at me, calling for me to join them. I waved back but stayed at my window, content to observe. This was enough, more than enough. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago, standing in that restaurant holding a cake knife, her world ending in front of a crowd. She'd been so lost, so broken, so convinced her life was over. If I could talk to her now, I'd tell her this. The ending is just the beginning. The pain you feel is the price of transformation. Pay it. The woman you'll become is worth every tear. I smiled at my reflection in the window glass. She was right there, that future woman, looking back at me with pride. On my way home from work one evening, I drove past the restaurant. It was closed now, windows dark, a for lease sign hanging in the door. The place where my old life ended had itself ended, replaced by nothing. There was poetry in that. I pulled over, engine idling, staring at the empty building. 5 years ago, I'd walked out of those doors broken and betrayed. Now I drove past strong and whole, my trunk full of groceries for the dinner party I was hosting tomorrow. Friends from the hospital, people who chose me and kept choosing me. I whispered to my steering wheel, to the empty restaurant, to the ghost of who I used to be. Some endings don't need applause, they just need peace. Then I drove home. My apartment was small but mine, decorated exactly how I wanted, full of plants and art and books I actually read. I made dinner for one, poured a single glass of wine, and ate slowly, savoring every bite. Later, I'd call Patricia to confirm tomorrow's plans. Maybe text Dr. Williams with an update on our newest initiative. But right now, this moment, I was content to just be Eleanor Matthews, 57 years old, Director of Nursing Services, survivor, thriver, whole. The end was also the beginning, and I was finally, truly, completely free. If you love this story, kindly subscribe to this channel and stay tuned as I bring more interesting stories to you.